another episode of Thinking That Matters. I am here in the location where we hold my Powerful Women Growth Group, and so that's why you don't see us in the studio, but I am here with Ashley Bledsoe, and I am super excited to have a conversation with her today around the value of thinking that matters. So Ashley, give us the 30, 60-second commercial, who you are, what you do, so that those listening or those that watch will kind of have a foundation for where our conversation is going to be.
Sure. So my name is Ashley Bledsoe, and I am the owner and founder of Bledsoe Hydro, which is an erosion control company based out of Wiley. We specialize in land reclamation, lawn installation, and lawn rejuvenation. So if you have a large acreage home that needs grass and you want to save tens of thousands of dollars on that, we're able to help with your Bermuda installation or wildflowers or any sort of millet if you have a duck hunting plot.
So wow, okay.
We're really able to install a wide variety of seeds and do a lot of different types of erosion control.
Okay, so I knew nothing about hydromulch before Ashley started coming to my Powerful Women Growth Group. So give them, like, if you had to, not that we have time to go into great detail, but give them the basics of how you, because we're talking about properties that could be acres, that you are spreading seed. Tell them a little bit maybe how you spread the seed and why that makes it so economical for people.
Sure. So it's actually distributed from a hose. We mix a combination of mulch, seed, fertilizer, and water in a large tank, and it's suspended from a hose, and we essentially paint it directly onto bare dirt. And as it receives water, that material breaks down to provide nutrients to those seedlings to then grow up, and it transitions almost like a healthy little dance, if you will. And everything breaks down. It's environmentally and economically friendly, and it's a really cost-effective alternative to sod to help homeowners save an astronomical amount of money.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this just reminds me of when Fred and I we got the notice from the HOA in Florida about how we needed to replace our sod. And so, of course, we needed it to be economical. So we're like, well, we'll just do it ourselves. Ask me how that went.
Yeah. Backbreaking work. It is backbreaking work.
There's a reason why people pay thousands of dollars to have sod installed. So you are really providing, there are several things that you said that I think are just so important. One, it is economical, and I think that's important. Two, that it is environmentally friendly. And I've seen your photos of once you've painted it on, and then about how long does it take before that lush green that I've seen in your videos?
So typically 4 weeks. If the homeowner is able to water around 2 times a day, it should germinate within 5 to 7 days, which is little teeny tiny babies about 1 centimeter tall. And then it switches gears to grow the root system below ground. And then around week 4 is when you really start to see the vertical growth and see it grow together laterally to fill in. And you're mowing a sea of grass in roughly 30 days. So it's really quite exciting.
It is pretty substantial. Okay, I want, help me to understand, and thus the people watching, what had you thinking hydromulch?
So desperation.
Okay.
1,000%.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, it's not something that I had discussed with my high school guidance counselor as a potential career path, that's for sure.
Really?
So it was during a moment. My husband had worked in the oil field for 8 years. Back in 2016, it had taken a tank, and long story short, he got laid off. So it was a very rocky point for us. And I had not worked in roughly 4 years, so I had a big gap in my employment. And we were kind of left in limbo, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so kind of in that despair, I realized I had to take hold of my future and figure out how I'm going to help provide for our family. And he found a full-time job as a mechanic, and I was venting to a family friend. He owned a hydromulching company out in Van, and he said that if I was able to, if we had a nest egg to invest, it would be something worth looking into because not many women are in this industry, and the government supports women-owned businesses, and they will literally support our business with it being women-owned and give us jobs, government jobs. And so my first question was, what is hydromulch? And I went home and I Googled it, and I kind of did a little R&D and ran it past my husband a few days later, and he thought about it, and he said, okay, if this is something you're truly passionate about and you want to do, go for it. And so that is kind of where Bledsoe Hydro Mulch was born.
Wow. And so literally you knew nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
You started with, really a hope of what it would become. Mm-hmm. In the early days, because of course this whole podcast is around thinking that matters, what were some of the challenging thoughts that you were dealing with? We might call them limiting beliefs. You might just outright call them negative thinking. Yeah. But tell us about that, because there are people who listen to this, they're probably going, man, I'm there. I'm desperate. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling to take the step to start the business, to invest, to understand. So tell us a little bit about your thought journey in the process.
Initially, right off the bat, I know with 100% certainty, I battled self-doubt and your typical imposter syndrome. Am I going to be good enough? Can I do this? Why am I doing this? I know nothing about this. Am I even in the right industry? Am I going to be able to make this a profitable business to help support our family? All those thoughts, and it just replaying consistently in your head. And I found the best way for me to get over those challenging thoughts and limiting beliefs were to push through the challenges and to kind of reframe my setbacks and focus on my education and myself. That way I was able to know without a shadow of a doubt my own personal what I'm able to achieve, to where anytime that thought crept back in to where am I good enough, I was able to resort back to my education saying, yes, I am. I'm certified through the National Association of Landscape Professionals, International Association of Hydro Seeding Professionals. I know what I'm talking about. You got this. So it's just a matter of believing in yourself and not listening to that little voice in your head that is always there. You just got to learn to turn the volume down.
Yeah, that's, you just said so much gold in that piece there. You talked about pushing through the challenges.
Yes.
All right. What for you, tell us what that looks like. What does pushing through a challenge look like?
Well, it's not pretty. It is what they refer to as the nitty-gritty. That is when you are in the thick of it. It is just, you are surrounded by all of the no's, all of the hard, all of the, the muck and the mud, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. But you have to keep going because you're capable of getting there and achieving that end result that you want. And the more you push through those challenges, they say there's this part in your brain called the anterior mid-singular cortex or something. And whenever you push through challenges and you do the things you do not want to do, that grows in size. It literally increases in size. And the significance to that is it is directly linked to your will to live. So anytime you push through difficult situations or challenges or do something you didn't want to do, you are literally increasing your will to live. So that is kind of just one thing that keeps me going and pursuing what I want to achieve.
I love that. Well, one, because the understanding that when we push through and we're increasing that spot in our brain, because here's the thing I say often, and I want to say it on here again, courage precedes confidence.
Yes.
Because courage sets off a whole host of neurotransmitters in your brain that work together to literally help link success of pushing through, to use your language, help link that to the thought process of, oh, I can do this. It is possible. And so when encouraged, we step forward and we take a step, we push through the hard, then what happens is we're able to look back and in confidence go, I can do this. It is possible. So I do love that. Now, you also said that you had to learn to reframe setbacks. I want you to share more about that, and if possible, maybe give an example of a setback that you faced that you had to reframe.
So one that sticks out in particular was, at the time, one of the largest commercial jobs we had landed. It was installing the now largest battery facility here in Texas. So it was a very monumental project that we had landed. And on this site, as soon as we had rolled out there, we have a very large truck and trailer machine. And when it's full of water, it's weighted down even more. And the site was not compacted properly. And so when we drove out there, we sank immediately. And that had never, like, we didn't just sink, like it sank down to the center of the axles sank.
Oh, okay, so you were down for the count,
we
basically.
were down for the count. Hadn't even started, hadn't even offloaded the first job. So I'm sitting there, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Wow.
Huge project, and we're now literally stuck in the mud. And this has never happened. And so long story short, we get through that whole setback. They have equipment, thankfully, on site. We're able to offload a little material where we're at to lighten the load, and they're able to kind of essentially hoist us up by both ends and relocate us in midair.
Right.
So they did a wonderful job. They didn't even scratch our equipment, so it was wonderful. But I could tell that the crew and myself were so shaken up and kind of set back from what had happened. Like our mojo was gone. We went into that day ready to attack it, ready to go, and before we even get started, like literally the worst case scenario happened. And I was sitting there thinking, how am I going to, revive this situation, get this back? So I was just kind of reframing that morning and telling our helper how great he did loading the materials up and how quickly and efficiently he did in helping us arrive on time. And if maybe we didn't get there on time, we wouldn't have had that spare time to help get us out of this situation. The day could have been much worse. Telling the driver different scenarios on things that he executed well that morning, to where it was kind of like, okay, yeah, this morning hasn't been a failure. It's just been a speed bump. There's a speed bump, and now we're back on it. And we were able to finish that day not only flawlessly with no more hiccups, but early and
Wow.
before we had projected. So we were able to catch back up and complete it on time. So it's just a matter, I feel, of not focusing on the negatives and trying to pick out the positives and framing it around that to help keep you going and help you focus on what you need to be focusing on.
Yeah, that's so good. So there's a couple of things that I heard. I actually love the metaphor of being stuck in the mud, because I believe that much like your truck literally was stuck in the mud, that as individuals, we get stuck in the mud of negative thinking.
Yes.
And we literally are stuck. And it's a struggle to get out of it. And so there were a couple of things that you said. You recognized, I found that you recognized that you all were shaken. You recognized that it was a speed bump. I also heard you say logistically, or maybe practically is the better word, that you were speaking life into your crew. You were pointing out good leading up to that to help keep them centered in a positive way. And I think that for those of you listening, what's important to take from that is we can do that for ourselves. That even when we are stuck in the mud, in negative thinking, it's how can we find the silver lining? It's how can we pull the things that will literally lift us up out of the mud and relocate us into a better situation. And I just love the resolution of that story is that you actually finished early.
Yeah.
And
they were blown away.
Which is awesome, but that goes to show that it also connects with your whole thing about pushing through the challenges, right? So we talked about reframing the setback. Then you mentioned focusing on your education and on yourself. Something that I've known Ashley now for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
It's fun life.
But one thing that I have always observed, and you've grown in your knowledge even since I first met you, is that you are well educated on your product, your service, delivery, care for. What has given you that passion to really continue to grow in education?
I would say my family, my husband, and just that support behind me, with him consistently in my corner and encouraging me that you got this, you can do this, don't forget how far you've come. I feel that's been instrumental in helping, keeping me going.
I love that. Now, I think I have it on good authority that your husband is now actually working in
Yes,
the hydro mulch business.
he is.
So how has that been as a married couple working together?
Well, we could go one of two directions with that. Which direction would you like to speak of? The challenges, or how great it is now that we've made it through those challenges?
Well, but I think, though, someone listening who they're either working with their spouse or they've already concluded in their mind they would never be able to work with their spouse. I think even if you can just touch on some of the challenges, and again, because that goes back to touch on the challenge, and then how have you pushed through the challenge to be where you are now and working together?
I'd say the first thing that is crucial to being able to work with your spouse effectively is learning the communication styles. Because how I communicate with you is different than how I communicate with my best friend. It's different than how I communicate with my cousin. And so I feel like it's very important to learn how to communicate effectively with that specific person. So your message is getting relayed properly. I feel like that's
because men and women are like speaking.
Yes.
It's like speaking a foreign language.
Yes.
The amount of times that Fred and I, as a husband and wife team, have not communicated well, even when we think we've communicated well, is really laughable.
Well, that's the thing, is everybody always says it's communication. Communication is key, but they don't tell you how to communicate. So that's the learning curve, is learning how to effectively communicate with each person differently.
Yes.
Then I would say decision making has been another challenge, because it's almost like now that you have this other person in and you're a joint force, who is the authoritative figure? Who is the final yes or no sayer? Who has the ultimate decision, or is there one? So that has been another challenge that we've had to learn to kind of get through. And then obviously the work-life balance. When do you shut it off? When is too much work too much? You know, do we stop talking about work at 8 p.m.? Do we stop talking about work at 9 p.m.? Do we stop talking about work at all? Because it's our passion, it's our life, it's our livelihood. So where is that balance? Is there a balance? How do you find that balance?
Yeah.
So,
you know, it's interesting. I did a podcast with Sandy Tutwiler, who she owns two franchise territories, and we actually talked about the misnomer of work-life balance, to your point. And so we talk about instead of it being work-life management, and how, say, you and your husband manage work-life and how Fred and I manage work-life could look very different. And so I think the important thing that I heard you say is that you led with the communication. And to that point, I would say that oftentimes, I think we hear regularly, communicate. But there's a difference in communicating and actually having mutual understanding.
yes.
Because we can be communicating, we can be talking, but we don't have mutual understanding.
Right.
And it's finding how you get to the mutually understood space where that is concerned. So I just appreciate it. But it sounds like you're doing much better now. Like you've pushed through some challenges.
Yes, and I feel like that's part of growth, right? You're not going to automatically start off this amazing power couple. How did power couples end up being a power couple? It's because they went through all of the muck and the mud and the challenges, and they grew from that because they learned that that's not going to drag them down. It's only temporary, and we're growing together through that to where now you come out of that with this sense of nothing can stop us. We are unstoppable.
Yeah.
And that's truly how we feel right now. Like, we feel unstoppable.
That's awesome. I do love it. It's true. Power couples are not created overnight. It does take time to build it. Fred and I have been entrepreneurs together for 24 years.
Yeah.
And in those early days, girl, just ask Fred. because we didn't have some clarity around some things. Yes, if you can see this, Fred's here recording. There you go. Exactly. He's over here. He wants to give a hearty amen, but he's being respectful. So before we get to a closing out place, I would love for you to address, because I think it is something that I want to have more conversation around as I'm interviewing people. You are in an industry that's very male dominated. Mm-hmm. What has that been like for you? What are some challenges that you've had to really work through being a woman building a thriving business in a very male dominated space?
Reminding myself that I do deserve a seat at that table, that I have worked for that seat, and I'm just as deserving as everybody else that is there. Because a lot of times there are people that will make you feel like you are less than, and want to dim your light, that you don't maybe know as much as you do know about this space. And it's just a matter of looking inward and remembering who you are, all of your achievements, and what you are capable of, and that you do deserve a spot at that table, and that there is a reason you are there.
And you mentioned about people try to dim your light. So someone listening who feels like they're up against this challenge of someone or some people are trying to dim their light, what would you say to them to be able to push through that potential challenge or limiting belief?
I've learned to give grace now, because there is most likely a reason that someone is trying to dim your light and make you feel less than. And it's most likely they are deflecting and putting how they feel onto you to make you feel the same. So I've learned to give grace and kind of just take it with a grain of salt, and then really kind of flip it and focus on them and start asking them, how are you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Or trying to just kind of flip the role reversal, because I kind of see now what they're trying to do, and I don't allow that to happen anymore. And I just keep focusing on myself and what I'm ultimately trying to achieve.
I love that. I love the admonition to give grace in the midst of someone trying to dim another's light. And I think giving grace comes out of, you can tell me your thoughts here, but I believe it's easier to give grace when we know who we are. And we do have a confident anchor that, as you said, you deserve a seat at the table. You have the education, you've done the work to build the business. I find when we're not in questioning mode, or we're not looking to other people to validate who we are, it's a lot easier to give grace. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, 1,000%. And I feel the most instrumental piece to allowing me to get to that point has been my faith, my growing in my faith. And it's been, guidance, strength, and support, and helping me find a sense of purpose throughout my journey, and also allowing me to stay grounded and kind of try and see the best in people no matter what the situation.
Yeah, so would you say being a business owner has helped grow your faith?
Yes. Yes.
I tell people all the time.
I know we're laughing, but I do feel like that no matter, even if you're speaking to any successful entrepreneur, they will say that there's no way that they were able to reach the level they were at without their sense of faith. Whatever they believe in, it's always a cornerstone in their success. I do not feel you can achieve the level of success that you want to achieve without a strong sense of faith.
I love that. So the podcast is Thinking That Matters. I ask every guest, because it's so important for people to hear different perspectives. So I want you to share why you believe it's important to develop thinking that matters.
Yeah. So I feel developing thinking that matters is really important, because that is what makes us make purposeful actions. And it's key for personal growth, innovation, self-development, and making ethical decisions.
Man, so many good things there. Make purposeful decisions, growth. I love that you added the word innovation.
Yeah.
Because when we're cultivating thinking that matters, we're honing in on our purpose, our vision, our mission, which obviously helps making purposeful decisions, but it also opens our mind to think about things in different ways.
Right.
So I love that dimension that you added to that thought process. So we want to encourage you today, whether you're listening, you're watching, you want to start a business, or you've already started a business and you're dealing with the challenge, take Ashley's encouragement, push through the challenge, reframe the setback, focus on education, focus on knowing who you are, and cultivate that cornerstone of faith so that if you find yourself, or when you find yourself stuck in the mud, that the work that you've put in daily, consistently, will help to lift you up and move you to a better way of thinking. Because when you cultivate thinking that matters, you can live a life that matters and you can build a business that matters.